AMD's new Monster 32-core Threadripper is out, and guess what? It's faster on Linux than Windows. Also, the L1 terminal fault, aka Foreshadow. What is it? What's it all about? Does it affect those of us running Linux? Happy 25th birthday to Debian. The popular GNU/Linux distribution turns 25 today. Dropbox plans to drop support for all Linux file systems other than unencrypted Extend 4. Plus, we need to discuss leaving user reviews for those of us that game, leaving user reviews on the games you play, how it helps the developers. These are 5 stories that today I'm taking into account. And the first story on the docket today is AMD's new 32-core Threadripper, this monster 32-core 64-thread Threadripper. It is performing an initial test much faster on Linux than on Windows 10 Pro. So Michael Larabelle, who is the creator of Phoronix, recently posted this over at Phoronix.com. This is a benchmarking where he tests the new AMD Threadripper 2990WX, that's that 32-core Threadripper, which has a price tag of $17.99 US, which is a fantastic price tag actually for what you're getting. 32-core, 64 threads, just an amazing CPU. There's really nothing comparable to it on the market right now. Intel, some of their i9 offerings, I guess, are sort of comparable, but from what I've seen on the internet, certain articles, this 32-core Threadripper really outperforms all the i9s, and it's going to be offered at a comparable or at cheaper price, probably. So, anyway, the Phoronix benchmarking here, looking at some of the benchmarkings, he pits Windows 10 against Clear Linux, Ubuntu 18.04, Antergos, and OpenSUSE Tumbleweed. And he runs these AMD Threadripper 2990WX benchmarks here through the Phoronix test suite. The first benchmark here is something called 4 stones. I'm not sure what that is, but the description says it's complex Connect 4 solving, so some kind of puzzle solving. And he puts the CPU through that, and more is better here. So OpenSUSE Tumbleweed performs very well. Actually, all 4 Linux distributions outperform Windows 10 Pro in that benchmark. And the next benchmark, Crafty version 25.2. In this particular benchmark, more is better. All 4 Linux distributions, once again, outperform Windows 10 Pro. X264. X264 is video encoding. I actually know what this is. This is where you use your CPU to encode video. It's very CPU intensive. It takes a real monster CPU to perform this kind of stuff. And the Threadripper does it well. We only have 3 operating systems tested in this. I guess OpenSUSE and Antergos, there must have been something wrong with the benchmark, but Clear Linux and Ubuntu both outperform Windows 10 Pro in the X264 benchmark. Graphics Magic, there's several Graphics Magic benchmarks here. The first one is Swirl, more is better, Windows 10 is dead last. The next one is Rotate, more is better, Windows 10 is dead last. The next one, Sharpen, more is better, so Windows 10 is dead last in that benchmark. The next one, Enhanced, more is better, Windows 10 dead last. You're seeing a pattern here, more Graphics Magic. 7-zip compression, more is better here, so Windows 10 dead last in this benchmark. Wow, the 7-zip compression, look how much better the Linux distros perform in that than Windows 10. They're just destroying Windows in this benchmark. Stockfish 9, I'm not sure what this is. This more is better in this, so once again, Windows 10 is dead last. Well, it and Clear Linux kind of trailing the pack, but Antergos, Ubuntu, OpenSUSE perform very well in that benchmark. This one, less is better, so Windows 10 is last in this benchmark. FLAC audio encoding, Windows 10, again, last. Blake 2, once again, Windows 10 is last, although everything is pretty close in that one. FFmpeg, less is better in this, once again, Antergos, Ubuntu, OpenSUSE perform very well in the FFmpeg benchmark. Windows 10, not so well. Clear Linux also did not perform well in the FFmpeg benchmark. MQueens, I'm not sure what this is, but less is better in this benchmark, so Windows 10, once again, trailing. And one more page of benchmarks here. Minion, less is better, Windows 10 is last. This particular Minion benchmark, which is Solitaire, less is better. Windows 10 actually first in this benchmark. Wow. So Windows 10 Pro with the AMD Threadripper 32 core, first in this benchmark. This is the benchmark Solitaire for Minion version 1.8. But then Windows 10 is last in the next Minion benchmark, which is Quasi Group. There's some Blender testing, which Blender is interesting because Blender is a animated video editing program. A very CPU intensive program. I have always wanted to learn how to use it myself so I could create, my own intros and outros for the channel instead of having to pay other people to do this sort of thing. But there is a learning curve for a program like Blender, but it uses a ton of CPU, and you know what? Less is better here in these benchmarks. Windows 10 is dead last in all 4 of the Blender benchmarks. Michael Larabelle here in the article, he discusses Blender in particular. Blender is one of the fun tests that can really pound on the 2990WX across all 64 threads, so Blender can actually use 64 threads. So, so that is a great benchmark to test this thing. And again, Windows, dead last. The 4 Linux distributions he tested performed magnificently. Michael Larabelle goes on to write, long story short, the Linux performance in a majority of these CPU-focused benchmarks were running much faster on the AMD Threadripper 2990WX than Windows 10 Pro when tested on the same hardware and the same configuration. Then again, we usually see better performance with Linux over Windows on most hardware, but not always to some of these extremes encountered. It will certainly be interesting to run more Windows versus Linux tests on the 2990WX Threadripper platform moving forward. So, is it shocking that Linux performs better than Windows? No. Is it shocking that Linux performs better than Windows to some of the extremes seen in this? I mean, basically, these benchmarks, Linux just creamed Windows. And every benchmark I think we looked at, except one, Windows was first in one of the benchmarks. So, this was actually pretty incredible. Michael mentions he's going to keep doing more of these benchmarks on the AMD Threadripper platform moving forward. Again, this is very new technology, this 32 core just being released recently. So, but right now, if you're looking to build a machine for Linux, those of us that run desktop Linux, consider building an AMD machine for the price. Obviously the 32 core Threadripper is probably out of most people's price range. It's out of my price range, but check out some of their 8 core, 10 core, 12 core offerings. I certainly wouldn't drop the money for i7 or certainly not the new i9s from Intel because, again, the Threadrippers are really outperforming them at a better price. And the next story on the docket today is the L1 terminal fault, aka Foreshadow. It is a new vulnerability that involves the Intel CPUs. What is it exactly, and does it affect us? That is the story here. Let me go to this news article over at CRN, and of course, as always, I'm going to link to all the stories I cover here on the show. I'll put it in the video description. So over at crn.com, Intel, new L1 terminal fault bugs hit virtual machines harder. Intel says L1 terminal fault and 2 other new vulnerabilities have a larger impact on virtual machines and will require greater safeguards. This particular article is written by Dylan Martin. Anyway, Intel disclosed Tuesday they found 3 more bugs within its server, client, and workstation processors, signaling that security issues for the company's CPUs are far from over. I think we all knew that since back in January when, of course, the gigantic news broke about Meltdown and Spectre. Intel has been hit really hard with all these CPU vulnerabilities. Their stock price has kind of tanked a little bit in recent months. AMD, of course, is doing big things, which leads us back to the first story. AMD, again, things are just going really, really well for AMD right now. And the last few months, things are not going so hot for Intel. So again, if you're building a machine right now, I'd probably look at the AMD CPUs personally over the Intel CPUs. But anyway, reading a little bit of the news article. The Santa Clara, California-based company, Intel, said that the L1 terminal fault and two related vulnerabilities are similar to previously disclosed side-channel analysis security issues, including the Meltdown and Spectre variants that kicked off this new level of concern over CPU security. So this is a bug kind of related to Meltdown and Spectre. I guess it's a similar kind of exploit. In a blog post published Tuesday, Intel product security head Leslie Culbertson said the new vulnerabilities can be mitigated through new updates being issued starting today. So they're already working to patch some of this. Let's see. We are not aware of reports that any of these methods have been used in real-world exploits. So really, since the very beginning, even back in January when we got Meltdown and Spectre, Intel is saying that they don't really have any real-world data saying anybody's ever been hit by any of these exploits. I mean, they're there. They are a security risk, but it doesn't seem like anybody has ever been affected by these things. That is Intel's official line, and that is their official line here. So, once again, reading this statement, we're not aware of any reports that any of these methods have been used in real-world exploits, but this further underscores the need for everyone to adhere to security best practices. This includes keeping systems up to date and taking steps to prevent malware. So, nobody's been hurt by this, but update your system and be cautious. Take steps to prevent malware. Good advice. The new L1 terminal fault vulnerability involves a security hole in the CPU's L1 data cache, which is a small pool of memory within each processor core that will help determine what instruction the core will execute next. What exactly does that mean? I'm not going to go into it now. I don't know that much about how CPUs work, especially these multi-threaded CPUs, modern CPUs. For those of you that want to know more how a CPU works and how this exploit works, redhat.com posted over on their website this very long and extremely detailed article, a brief history of the modern Microsoft microprocessor cache. Basically, it tells you all about modern CPU architecture and how the L1 terminal fault may or may not affect you. And when I say it's a long article, I mean it's quite a bit to read here, and it goes, pretty in-depth. So, not easy reading, but for those of you that want to go into greater detail, I will link to the redhat.com article, and of course I'm going to link to CRN's news article. Reading a little bit more of the news article here over at CRN, the very last line, Intel stock slipped less than 1% to $48.13 on Tuesday afternoon, after they announced, the vulnerabilities. So Intel, again, they're struggling right now. All right. And the third story on the docket today is Happy Birthday, Debian. Debian turns 25 today. So, Debian is one of the oldest active Linux distributions still around. That's the second oldest, actually. Slackware is the oldest active Linux distribution that's still being maintained. Slackware turned 25 just a few weeks ago. Debian turns 25 today. Fantastic that we still have both Slackware and Debian around. Of course, Debian is an insanely popular GNU/Linux distribution because it is basically the father to hundreds, maybe thousands of Linux distributions that have come and gone over the years. So, reading this article here over at ITWire, this was written by Sam Varghese. Debian GNU/Linux project to mark 25th birthday on Thursday, today. So the project will turn 25, with the Linux distribution having made its debut back on August 16th, 1993, under the leadership of the late Ian Murdoch. Ian Murdoch was the founder of Debian. That's where Ian, that's where that part of the name comes from. Ian Murdoch passed away few years back. In its original manifesto, Murdoch stated, "Many distributions have started out as fairly good systems, but as time passes, attention to maintaining the distribution becomes a secondary concern. Maintaining a Debian system was made simple after some developers created a package management system known as apt. So apt, apt, of course, is the package manager for Debian and most Debian-derived Linux distributions, such as, of course, the very popular Ubuntu distribution. Of course, apt has a lot of front ends to it, such as, for those wanting a graphical front end, Synaptic Package Manager is installed on most Debian and Debian-based Linux distributions. So Synaptic is a fantastic graphical package manager. Reading a little bit more of this IT Wire article, Debian has served as the base for 2 distributions. There are more than 300 in all that are well known for different reasons. One, Ubuntu, the most widely used distribution. The other, Knoppix, is the best known live distribution. So the primary reason for Debian project success has been its devotion to free software and the efforts put in by more than 1,000 developers worldwide to create a quality distribution. With 3 streams of development, stable, unstable, testing, when you install Debian, you have the options of using their stable branch, their testing branch, which is what will be the next stable release, and of course they have an unstable branch, which they call SID. SID is completely rolling release. It is very much like Arch or Gentoo, that sort of thing. So Debian arguably has much more work to do to keep up with things because they have 3 branches. They have stable, testing, and unstable. So just a ton of work that probably goes on with Debian. Of course, again, it has thousands of developers worldwide. And of course, because it is the father of so many Linux distributions, including Ubuntu, the most popular, and no doubt Canonical, a lot of those guys also help contribute to Debian because that work, of course, filters down into Ubuntu. Anyway, reading a little more about the 25th birthday here, but the team does a commendable job in having used Debian. Well, that's the author. He's used Debian since 2000. He can testify to the team doing a commendable job. Let's see. The initial goal to produce a non-commercial distribution that could effectively compete in the commercial market has worked out beyond the wildest dreams of any Debian developer. So Debian, completely community distribution, but does compete in the commercial market. Just look at this server market. Debian Stable, their stable branch, Debian Stable is extremely popular in the server market. Think web servers. You go to any large web hosting company and look at the servers they offer. Chances are they offer Debian on their web servers. Debian, CentOS, Ubuntu LTS server. It tends to be what most hosting companies tend to offer. So Debian, again, an extremely popular project. One interesting thing to look at, though, is the Linux family tree. The Linux family tree dating back all the way to 1993. Debian, and then I can't even zoom out to show you this whole thing, but I mean, it's going to be a monster graph here of all the distros that Debian has birthed. I mean, this is their part of the Linux family tree. Just incredible. The Debian family tree here probably takes up at least half of the Linux family tree. It's really incredible. When you factor into distros like Ubuntu, Linux Mint, Elementary, all these Debian-based distros, MX becoming popular now, Antix, especially because of the Ubuntu family, probably 90% or more of desktop Linux users use Debian in some way. I mean, you're using Debian or you're using a Debian-based Linux distribution on the desktop. I would say easily 90% desktop Linux users are running a Debian-based Linux distribution, so it is just fantastic that Debian is still alive and doing so well after 25 years. I want to wish everybody that contributes to Debian happy 25th birthday. Keep it going, guys. Okay, our 4th story this evening. Dropbox plans to drop support for most Linux file systems starting in November. So Dropbox, now they're saying they only want to support unencrypted Extend4 file systems for Dropbox on Linux. So let's get into this. Over at the Register, this particular article is written by Richard Shergwin. Dropbox plans to drop encrypted Linux file systems in November. They actually plan on dropping more than just encrypted Linux file systems. They plan on dropping every Linux file system except for specifically unencrypted Extend4. So, reading a little bit of this article. Linux users are calling on Dropbox to reverse a decision to trim its file system support to unencrypted Extend4 only. The company's supported file system list, which is here, is missing some formats, including various encrypted Linux file systems. Until that list was revived, Dropbox said it supported NTFS, HFS, Extend4, and APFS on Linux. As the new requirements makes clear, Linux users will only be able to run unencrypted Extend4 starting in November. So basically, Dropbox just announced in November, all you guys that are running something like encrypted Extend4 will not be able to use Dropbox any longer. It has to be unencrypted Extend4. If you're running Extend3, no go. XFS, no go. ButterFS, no, we're not supporting that. RiserFS, no. This obviously got a lot of backlash from a lot of Dropbox users on Linux. Full disclosure, I am a long-time user of Dropbox. I have Dropbox running on my system right now, and I'm not real happy about this, even though most of the time I do use unencrypted Extend4 file systems on my machines, but not always. Sometimes I do Linux installs, especially on reviews, and I take whatever the default file system is for the most part. And for some Linux distros, they will, use a XFS file system, sometimes over an Extend4. And I would like to still be able to sync my Dropbox on that machine to all my other machines that use unencrypted Extend4. So I'm not real happy about this. Basically, in a forum thread, Dropbox explains a supported file system is required as Dropbox relies on extended attributes, which are called X attributes, to identify files in the Dropbox folder and keep them in sync. We will keep supporting only the most common file systems that support X attributes, so we can ensure stability and a consistent experience. So I'm not sure what the problem here is, because there are several file systems, common Linux file systems, that support X attributes. I'm not sure why it just has to be unencrypted Extend4. They've been supporting pretty much every file system on the planet. I've never heard of anybody saying Dropbox didn't work on their system because they were using XYZ file system. So this is strange. I'm not really sure why they're making this decision, to be honest. But anyway, with 240 comments in that thread so far where Dropbox announced their decision, it seems the decision has been badly received. You think? Here's one example. And this is a quote from one of the people on the forum thread. On my machine, I'm running the ButterFS file system where the Dropbox folder is stored. ButterFS is the standard default file system for Ubuntu system partitions, and it supports the mentioned X attributes. So on top of ButterFS, there's an encryption layer running, eCryptFS, which also is Ubuntu default if home folder encryption is activated. Will the new Dropbox desktop client solely run on Extend4, or will it check to see if the file system where the Dropbox folder is stored supports the extended attributes? So basically this guy is asking, hey, my file system's not Extend4, but it has those extended attributes you say Dropbox needs, to properly sync and whatnot. Why can't you just check if my file system has the X attributes and supported it if it does? And I agree with him. It doesn't make sense. Another commenter asked about using LUKS, L-U-K-S, which is the Linux Unified Key Setup for full disk encryption. He was a bit angrier than the first comment I read. He writes, yes, I'm running LUKS encryption on top of my ButterFS partition where I have my Dropbox folder, and I still don't see a valid and proper reason why this configuration shouldn't work. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to reformat my whole Linux partition just because of Dropbox. There are reasons why I'm on ButterFS. I'd like to hear some proper engineering explanation why suddenly X attributes is required now and why only extend 4 is supported, because I really don't think there's any. This just seems like a lot of product marketing crap. There are reasons why VFS exists in Linux. So this guy is upset, and he should be. I'm not real happy about the decision either, even though, like I said, for 90% of the Linux installs I do, I use unencrypted extend 4, but still, if I want to run ButterFS or XFS or run encrypted extend 4, I should be allowed to, and I should have my Dropbox client work. There's no reason for it not to. It doesn't make any sense. So Dropbox really needs to They need to alter this. They need to modify their position on this, and they need to, at the very least, they need to support encrypted extend 4, and they need to support ButterFS and probably XFS, because there are a lot of people that use those file systems too on Linux. You're really cutting a lot of people out going encrypted extend 4 only. So I hope Dropbox they listen to some of the complaints they're getting, because there has been serious backlash to this. And I think in the end, Dropbox as a business, especially, we didn't even consider this. A lot of people pay for Dropbox, because of extra storage. A lot of people on Linux are paying for Dropbox. What about those paying customers? Are you going to drop support because of their file system? They're running a non-supported file system. What's going to happen to those paying customers? That's something you got to consider. Anyway, I think they'll probably change their minds. I hope they do. We'll see. And the last story on the docket this evening is leaving user reviews for Linux games, how it can really help Linux game developers. So, this article over at Gaming on Linux I thought was really interesting, because, it brought, something to my attention, things I never even considered about, leaving game reviews. We always talk about leaving things like bug reports, filing a bug report, or, doing bug triage for various programs, especially free and open source programs, contributing to those sorts of things. But what about games? Many of these games, of course, were not open source, they're proprietary. But Liam Dahl over here at Gaming on Linux writes this article about leaving user reviews for Linux games really helps a developer. So he writes, "We all know the current Linux gaming market share isn't turning heads, and it can be tough to persuade developers that having a Linux version is worth it. I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about user reviews and how they can help out. The primary focus here will be Steam, as it's the largest player, but this also should apply to GOG, Good Old Games, and itch.io and other stores. Since I follow a lot of developers and talk to developers every single day, one of the biggest problems they currently face is actually getting noticed. Unless you have some fantastic marketing skills or the backing of a decent PR firm or publisher, they're probably going to struggle in the current market, given how many games are bursting onto the various stores like Steam every single day." He writes, "I constantly see developers practically begging for people to review their game on Steam because of just how important those reviews are." So he goes on to write that, the Steam reviews, they're incredibly important. Most gamers do not take the time to write those reviews. He writes that developers are more likely to continue supporting Linux with future games if we are useful. Mainly he's writing, hey, you know what? If you're running Linux, you're running these games on Linux, write reviews about these games you're running. Especially when the majority we speak to mention that a Linux version wasn't truly worthwhile in terms of financial reward. So most game manufacturers say it's not worth their time to create a Linux version of their game. So we need to make ourselves a little more useful to these game developers. So give them another reason to support our platform, Linux. So if more developers suddenly saw reviews, Liam goes on to write, from a few hundred or even a few thousand Linux gamers, which helps them get noticed on Steam's various algorithms for putting games in front of people, this could actually help quite a lot, because, the more reviews, they get ranked better on Steam's algorithms, the more games they ultimately sell. Again, If us as Linux gamers make ourselves more useful to the game companies, they will keep supporting our platform. So help those guys out, they'll keep helping us out. That's basically the point of this article. Anyway, I just thought this was an interesting read. I'm not that much of a gamer. I do some gaming on my channel, but I had never considered, leaving reviews for the games I played. I didn't consider how helpful they are. Like I run my YouTube channel, and I tell you guys all the time that things like subscribes, comments, shares, especially comments, really help me rank better in the YouTube algorithms. It gets eyes on my channel, eyes on my video, more eyes on my content. It basically, he's saying it works the same for Steam. The more people leaving reviews, especially positive reviews on the games, the more these games rank better in the Steam algorithms, the more likely they come up in search results, which means the more that their game sells. So, and this stuff apparently is insanely important to these game developers. And Liam over here at Gaming on Linux says that we as Linux users really should do more of this, because probably most computer users, period, most gamers are apathetic to this sort of stuff. They don't really care. But if we, as a small niche of the market share, Linux gamers, if we make ourselves more useful than, say, that gigantic pool of Windows gamers, again, the game companies, they may continue to support our platform, even though financially it may or may not be worth it to them. Anyway, I thought it was an interesting article, something to consider. Alright, and that was our fifth and final story for this evening. This was Taking Into Account episode 4. Again, taking into account, we're going to do this every Thursday. This will be a weekly show. I will publish a new episode of Taking Into Account sometime on Thursday, every Thursday, going forward. Now, what I've done the last 2 episodes, and I think this will continue as a tradition on the show, other than my 5 main stories to end the show, I will read a viewer comment or question that somebody posts to me, from my email or Mastodon account or whatnot. So I will do that again this week. So I got this direct message over on Mastodon. Let me refresh that. There we go. Zoom in a little bit. All right. DT, have you had broadcasting experience previous to DistroTube? I mean, you have intros and outros. You have custom shirts, quality microphone and gear. How'd you get started on this stuff? So basically, have I had broadcasting experience previous to starting the DistroTube channel 10 months ago? No. Know nothing about broadcasting, know nothing about audio, video editing, never made a YouTube video, never done anything like this before starting this channel 10 months ago. Zero experience. I have intros and outros. Yes, I do. I did not create those. I would have to be, a real artist, and I would have to be familiar with programs such as, Blender, for example. I don't know how to use those things. I bought my intro. And if you don't have those skills, that's what you need to do. There are online websites that sell, short little intros and outros. Some of them allow you to slightly customize them, add your logo and whatnot. If you need a more customized, intro, outro, what you need to do is hire a qualified freelancer to do the work for you. I have custom shirts. Yeah, custom shirts are not hard. Go to, Teespring or, Cafe Press or a number of different places to get, custom gear made that you can sell for, and the custom shirts, by the way, you guys that are buying the custom shirts, I really appreciate that. That really does help the channel, by the way, because I get a pretty good percentage on that stuff. I mean, a few bucks for every shirt I sell, and that's pretty decent money. Because like the AdSense revenue on YouTube, for example, I mean, I make more money sometimes selling one shirt on Teespring than I make for the ads that ran all day on YouTube. So that stuff really helps. So I really appreciate you guys that do buy the DistroTube gear from my Teespring store. I have a quality microphone, quality gear. Yeah, I don't have, like top of the line gear, but I figured it up the other day of all the computer equipment and various equipment I've bought in the last 10 months, mainly to do this channel. And I've spent about $1,700 or $1,800, I think, on the channel so far, on a lot of, my equipment, hard drives, laptops, microphone, webcam, stands for the microphone, stands for the webcam, my IZ dock, and so many other things. Spent, again, close to $2,000. So it's not cheap, but you guys really do help support the channel. That's why I love you guys that help support me on Patreon. That stuff really does matter. I would not be able to do this without Patreon support, without you guys, that support the channel. Sometimes some of you guys make one-time donations with PayPal. Love it. You guys that are, again, buying some of the gear. The AdSense revenue even does help. Super chats when I do my live streams really helps out. And of course, the final sentence here. And how did I get started doing this? How did I get started in doing a YouTube channel? I just started. And when he mentioned this question to me, I couldn't help but think I bookmarked an article, probably 2 or 3 weeks back. I'm not exactly sure when I bookmarked this article, but this article over at entrepreneur.com, it just struck me the other day when I bookmarked it. You've got the dreams, but are you doing the work? And this is so true. This is what so many people in life don't get. You've got dreams, but are you doing the work? So I decided to start this YouTube channel. And early on, I didn't really know what I was going to do, but very quickly it grew, and it's growing very fast now. And I know I want to take this serious. Am I putting in the work? What are you doing? What are your goals in life? Are you putting in the work? This article here has some fantastic advice. Dan Dowling, I guess is the article here. And of course, I will link to this article in the show descriptions. Your dreams are as realistic as the work you're willing to put in. So how much work are you putting in? You don't have to do a lot initially, but you do have to be consistent. So in my case here, I started this YouTube channel. My goal was to average making about a video a week was my goal. And for about 10 months now, I'm 10 months in, and I am right at 300 videos I've made. So I'm averaging about a video a day. That was my goal. It's a ton of work. A ton of work. Thousands of hours have went into what I've done so far on this channel. You have to be consistent, meaning you have to just do it. It's like this. Anything in life you want to be successful at. Do you want to work out? Get in better shape, for those of you that are overweight, lose weight, or just get in better shape in general, want to put on some muscle, look better. You can't just go to the gym and expect it to be overnight. No, you have to be consistent. You have to put in the work consistently over months, really over years. And you have to go into it with that mindset. A lot of people, when they think of the kind of work that goes into some of these big goals, and especially when you start thinking in terms of years or thousands of hours, some people say, well, that's so much. I'm not even going to start it because there's no way I can do that. No. The thing to do is just whatever it is you want to do, get started. That's the hardest part. Just get started. You have something you want to do, whatever it is, just start it. Getting started. Once you get it started, then just be consistent at it. Have some kind of set schedule and just do it. It's like anything in life. It's like you go to work every day. You don't want to do it, but you got to do it. You have to treat that goal the same way. I don't want to be sitting in front of this camera right now making this video, but you know what? I have to do it. You know why? Because I have goals, and this is part of being consistent. So I will link to this article. This is actually a fantastic article. He mentions, start by picking just one goal. A lot of people, have all these goals. Pick something and focus on one thing and try to complete that one thing. Get consistent at planning and doing the work. Anyway, I thought this was a fantastic article over at entrepreneur.com, and I do want to thank the fellow that sent me this private message over on Mastodon. Since it was private message, I didn't put his name here in there, but I do appreciate the question over on Mastodon. For those of you that have not joined me over on Mastodon, guys, leave Twitter and Facebook behind. Come join all the action over on Mastodon. It's great. I just love being over there. It's become my social media network of choice, and I cannot recommend it enough. Anyway, that is this edition of Taking Into Account, Episode 4. I'll see you guys next Thursday. Before I go, I do need to give a special thanks to my patrons. I'm talking about A.K., Alan, Alex, Ansem, Tony, Bart, Benjamin, Ben, Bruno, Brian, Carlos, Christian, Chuck, Dan, the other Dan, Daniel, David, The other David, Eduardo, Greg, Humate, Interceptor, Jake, John, Carl, Katrina, Keith, Leor, Marcus, the other Marcus, Matt, Mark, Martin, Matthias, Michael, Mr. GFY, Mr. Smarty Pants, Mr. Neely, Pops, Paul, Rob, Robert, Ron, Silvio, Steven, the other Steven, yet another Steven, so many Stevens, Swami, Tiedemann, Voice Live, Tabella, John, you guys rock. You guys help make this show possible. Peace, guys.